friends, welcome back. This is part 2 of the Trilateral CFR roster from 1979, and I realized that it's kind of reading like stereo instructions where we're just doing like this whole so-and-so begat so-and-so kind of a familial or unorderly history that's just as boring as all hell. So I apologize for that, and I think we'll do a little more unconventional vetting of their bios now that we realize what a bore chore it is to go through all these people. So we stopped at Robert Bowie, and we're on to John Bradimus. So I think what I'm going to do is just basically state their ties, okay? So we're going to say passed away in 2016, served as the majority whip of the United States House of Representatives. Do you know what the whip is? The whip is the guy who actually holds the whip. The whip is the guy that is designed to keep them in line. So he was just like the United States House of Representatives babysitter for the Democratic Party, if you will, from 77 to 81. Career member of the United States House of Reps for 20 years, 13th president of New York University from 81 to 92, and subsequently the chairman of the board for the Federal Reserve Bank, where he was a member. In addition, he was a board member of the New York Stock Exchange and the Rockefeller Foundation. So again, all these names tie in together. Moving on, Andrew Felton Brimmer, United States economist, served as a governor of the Federal Reserve System. Again, he was the first African American who actually served in the Federal Reserve System. He was a business leader, a very, very well-educated man. Seattle, Washington, had a Fulbright scholarship to study in India and enrolled in 1952 at Harvard University. 57, got his PhD from Harvard. So he actually implemented something called the Central Bank of the Sudan. Brimmer also became Assistant Secretary of Economic Affairs in the U.S. Department of Congress. 66, appointed from Lyndon Johnson. He had an 8-year term of the Board of Governors on the Federal Reserve and became the first African American in this position. All right, moving on. William Brock. Brock was a native of Chattanooga, Tennessee, worked for his parents' candy business. Now, this guy was kind of on the up and up. He tried really hard to help his hometown, which is highly commendable. So he was the Tennessee 3rd Congressional District based in Chattanooga. He has a very, very long bio. So he was reelected in 64 over 9 points amid Lyndon Johnson's 44 state landslide. He, in 1970, was the Republican nomination to face 3-term incumbent U.S. Senator Al Gore Sr., defeating country singer Tex Ritter in the primary. Okay, I'm going to scroll through a lot of Brock's earlier stuff. After leaving Senate, Brock became the new chairman of the Republican National Committee, a position he held from 77 to 81. That seems to be like the magical time frame of shit hitting the fan in government and of the trilateral takeover. Brock resigned from his cabinet post in late of 87 to serve as the campaign manager for Senator Bob Dole's presidential campaign. They had a public falling out, and ultimately he was fired from Dole's campaign, and then later Dole resigned after losing several key states that would have ultimately made or broke his campaign efforts. At that point, really, when he lost those 3 big states, it wasn't really even worth his efforts to continue running because he knew that at that point... Sorry, I'm plugging my phone in there, guys. Okay. Dole and Brock had a public falling out. Yes. In 1994, he won the Republican U.S. Senate primary in Maryland over future convict Ruth Ann Aaron, but was soundly defeated 41 to 59 in the general election by Democratic incumbent Paul Sarbanes. Brock is a member of the Reformers Caucus of Issue 1 and currently resides in Annapolis, Maryland. So he's one of the few people that is actually still with us today. Many of these people would be like 95 to 100 now. Okay, Harold Brown. He is also deceased. He was an American nuclear physicist who served as the United States Secretary of Defense from 77 to 81, our magical time frame, under President Jimmy Carter. Previously, in the Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson administrations, he held the post of the Director of Defense Research and Engineering from 61 to 65, and the United States Secretary of the Air Force from 65 to 69. He was very, very smart. He was a child prodigy. He graduated from the Bronx High School of Science at age 15. He got his PhD in physics from Columbia at age 21. As Secretary of Defense, he set the groundwork for the Camp David Accords. He took part in strategic arms negotiations with the Soviet Union and supported unsuccessfully the ratification of the SALT II Treaty. So do you guys know what SALT stood for? It's the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks. Okay, moving on. We're still discussing Brown here. After a short period of teaching and postdoctorate research, Brown became a research scientist at the Radiation Laboratory at the University of California. At Berkeley, he played a key role in the construction of the Polaris missile and the development of plutonium. By 1952, he joined the staff of the University of California Radiation Laboratory at Livermore and became its director in 1960. Oh, that's Livermore. Sorry, my bad. Okay, so he was a genius, and it is interesting to me that he served as one of our main weapons guys here, because so it says he led a team of 6 other physicists older than he was, who used some of the first computers along with mathematics and engineering to reduce the size of thermonuclear warheads for strategic military use. Brown and his team helped make Livermore's reputation by designing nuclear warheads small enough and light enough to be placed on the Navy's nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines, SSBNs. During the 1950s, he served as a member of or consultant to several federal scientific bodies and as senior science advisor at the 58-59 Conference of the Discontinuance of Nuclear Tests. That's interesting. He designed them, redefined them, made them more quote-unquote user-friendly for the Navy, and then spoke out at a conference to discontinue them. That's hypocritical. Brown worked under the United States Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara as Director of Defense Research and Engineering from 61 to 65, and then as the United States Secretary of the Air Force from 65 to 69. I think we already said that there. So let's move on here. He was a very, very highly intelligent man, and there's still quite a bit on Brown discussing ICBMs, SLBMs, strategic bombers. He decided not to produce the B-1 bomber, but he did recommend upgrading the existing B-52s. It goes on to talk about very low radar profiles, MX missiles, the Minuteman and the Titan, the testing in Utah and Nevada, which my other grandfather, not the one that there's a book about, but my mother's father, when he was in the military, he participated in the Utah and Nevada tests. And my husband and I have decided that we're going to go and dig out all of the family records to scour them and see if there's anything important that we can pull out and share with you. And I know that I have some of the newspaper articles that my grandma saved regarding my grandfather's name in the newspaper talking about the Nevada test sites. Also, my husband's grandfather was a member of the CIA, and he was a member of the Knights of the Blue Nose. And so he spent a lot of time in Tully, Greenland, back and forth. And he did a lot of strategic recon and stuff like that. So we're going to go through his documents to see what's in there. If anything at all, probably not. But it'd be interesting to kind of put it all together and correlate it now to see what they were working on. So, all right, let's finish up with Brown here, okay? Because the Carter administration... lost my place, sorry. Brown regarded the strengthening of NATO as a key national security objective and worked hard to invigorate the alliance. With the assistance of Robert Comer as his first special advisor on NATO affairs and subsequently Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, Brown launched a series of NATO initiatives shortly after taking office. So by May of 1978, the NATO heads of government endorsing a long-term defense program, which included 10 priority categories. So those 10 categories were enhanced readiness, rapid reinforcement, stronger European reserve forces, improvements in maritime capabilities, integrated air defenses, effective command, control, and communications, electronic warfare, rationalized procedures for armaments collaboration. Yeah, I said electronic warfare. Isn't that crazy? Armaments collaboration, logistics coordination, and increased war reserves, and theater nuclear modernization. So you can read a lot more about all of Brown's accomplishments. He was a very key player, a very, very influential individual in NATO, in refining the way that we use our military weapons today, especially the big ones. And during the same time of national security policy, like I said, he had his hand in the SALT II treaties also. Let's see. The Panama, he had his hand in the Panama Canal issue that we talked about. Camp David Accords, which of course were about the Egyptian-Israeli negotiations in the Middle East. Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in December of 1979. Rapid Deployment Joint Task Force in Southwest Asia at MacDill Air Force Base, Florida in 1980. So he really had a huge, huge hand in all of this. But the one thing that Brown did, probably more than anything else, is he increased the fiscal budget of war, I guess, if you will. So check this out. The total obligational authority, or TOA, of the $8 billion fiscal year of 1977's budget, he promised to cut... okay, let's backtrack here. I apologize. So during the 1976 campaign, President Carter criticized the defense spending levels of the Ford administration, and he promised cuts in the range of $5 to $7 billion. But shortly after he became secretary, Brown suggested a series of amendments to Ford's proposed fiscal year 1978 budget, having the effect of cutting it by almost $3 billion, but still allowing a total obligational authority, TOA, increase of more than $8 billion over that fiscal year. So even though he said, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and cut the $3 billion from here. So even though we couldn't get to the $5 to $7 billion earmark of what we wanted to cut, no, we cut $3 billion. But then he turned around and he increased it by general spending of $8 billion. Okay, so then at the end of that year of 1978, they were spending $116.1 billion on the defense budget. Over the course of the next 3 years, in 1980, it was $124 billion, so it had increased by $10 billion. By 1981, it was $141 billion, so another $18 billion or so. And in 1981, it went up to $175.5 billion. So from 1978, when it was $116 billion, to 1981, when it was $175 billion, that is not a reduction. That is a $68 billion growth over 4 years. And Brown was responsible for that big push. So in his 2012 memoir, Star-Spangled Security, Brown boasted that the Defense Department budget in real terms was 10 to 12% more when we left than when we came in, which he said it was not an easy accomplishment. Acceleration of the Trident submarine program, the Poseidon submarines. Okay, so we're done. I think we need to be done with Brown here. He said that he left office in January 20th, 1981, following President Carter's unsuccessful bid for re-election. In 1980, he actively defended the Carter administration policies, speaking frequently on national issues of public. After leaving the Pentagon, he remained in Washington, D.C., joining the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies, And thinking about national security, defense, and foreign policy in a dangerous world, Brown was affiliated with research organizations and served on the boards of numerous corporations like Altria, which was previously Philip Morris. In 2006, he participated in a meeting at the White House of former secretaries of defense and state to discuss United States foreign policy with Bush administration officials. And in 2011, Brown became a member of the United States Energy Security Council, which seeks to diminish oil's monopoly over the U.S. transportation sector and is sponsored by the Institute of Analysis of Global Securities. He passed away at the age of 91 on January 4th, 2019. God rest his soul. So there was a huge influence in federal government, increasing the budget of the war effort and just overall securities. And he was a very brilliant individual, but he was very aggressive in his efforts, and he had several accomplishments in the government before he left. So I think that's where we're going to stop it, because the next one is Zbigniew Brzezinski, and there are 15 pages on him. So I think I'm going to go through and pull out just the key highlights of, which is very difficult because his entire biography includes every name that we've heard so far. So, I mean, we're talking about Camp David, Panama Canal, United States Ambassador to Sweden, Harvard University, all of these recurring, currently existing links that we have proven for all of the previous people on this list. So from Zbigniew to William Coleman, that will be the next video. And I'll try and write all of these down in a more concise effort to group them all one way or another back to David Rockefeller, not just through the Trilateral membership or the Council of Foreign Relations or the Bilderberg Group, but also just to kind of give you the full circle of how they all come back around and how that old saying, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Well, they were definitely doing a lot of back scratching, because everything comes back around to that, what do they call it, like the 2 degrees of separation or something. They're all directly, immediately tied to each other's business, personal business, through this private organization of the Trilaterals, and directly influencing our government in the day. So thank you for joining me. I hope this was a little bit less like stereo instructions. I know it's rough to get through people's bios, especially when it's like government bios, but I think it's still important to go through and just prove that all of these people on this list are in some way relative and relevant to all of these bigger, corrupt, we'll call them alphabet gangs, shall we? Okay, thanks for joining me. So the next video will be the end of column 1. So thanks for joining me. Talk to you soon.